Hello and welcome back. Decided to do a little sit down video to talk about my least favorite books of 2024. Thankfully, overall, I think I had a really great reading year. Like, there was a lot of books that I absolutely loved. My favorite list was much harder to make than this one. And I had a lot of books that I really enjoyed, but they landed in like the 3 to 4 star range. I don't think I gave any book 1 star other than maybe one book, but everything else was like that I didn't like would be in like the 2 star range. So I picked out 5 books that left me feeling like, ugh, why did I spend time reading this? And I just wanted to share with you my thoughts. We'll go in order from least bad to, oh my gosh, I can't believe I spent time on this book. Number 5 is a romance book called It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. Now, I don't inherently think that this book is bad, but it's just not my style of romance. This was the first Tessa Bailey book that I've read, and I know that her books are more on like the spicy fun times kind of side, which is fine inherently. I think what made me more upset was how the characters were handled and how convenient a lot of like plot elements were. Now, I'm listening to a romance on audio to like, decompress from the world and have a silly goofy time, and this book is a silly goofy time if you want it to be. We're following our 2 main characters, Piper and Brendan. I think that's what their names are. Piper is like stereotypical city girl, lives the high life until she has a fall from grace and is sent to live in like this small fisherman town where she meets this like fishing captain by the name of Brendan. And for me, I could not imagine being attracted to either of them. It's very hard for me to read romances where the people feel like they don't have a lot going on outside of like their relationship with each other and their occupations. I feel like Piper had a lot more going on than Brendan, but I did not like Brendan as like a main love interest. He was kind of like too gruff all the time, and that's just not my vibe. I feel like Piper at least was explored a bit more, but ultimately I feel like her character development kind of fell flat because it was like the expected arc for somebody to go through. There was not a lot of like nuance, and I left it feeling like, wow, I read that really fast, but it wasn't really that great. I still kind of had fun with it, but I feel like Tessa Bailey's writing is not something that I'll be drawn back to. It was very like surface level, very like, this is what's happening, then this happened, then this happened. It wasn't like a little bit flowery, which I like at times, and a lot of like the tension and romance between them was like them calling each other baby, and I can't do that. So this one fell a little flat for me. I think other people might enjoy Tessa Bailey, but I don't think she's for me. Number 4 makes me a little sad because this was the first book I read by this author, and this author has a like cult following on Bookstagram and Booktube and all of the book sites. And the book in question was What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This was like a novella that was a retelling of the House of the Fall of Usher, which is like an Edgar Allan Poe story. And it's kind of like a gothic inspired story. I knew that like the main horror element of it was going to be like fungus stuff, and I was like, I like mushrooms, I'll give it a try. And the audiobook was super short, so I put it on, and we follow this main character who's like an ex-soldier, and they're returning to this house where they have like family friends, but there's something wrong with one of the family friends. I feel like a lot of this story was just very boring and dense descriptions. Like, I don't think I actually like internalized or got excited about a part of the book until there was only like 1 hour left in the audiobook. It was not like super gripping. It was much more like you're walking down a dark hallway, but you're not exactly sure what you're seeing. When it did describe like the fungus stuff, it was pretty creepy. So like, I didn't absolutely hate it, but I also didn't feel anything after I finished this book. I was like, oh, that was kind of a bummer. I will not be reading the second one. Okay, now we're actually getting into heated territory. Number 3 was a book that I also thought I was going to like because it's the like amount of like pretentious feminist literature that I thought I would really enjoy, because if you don't know, I was an English major in college, and I feel like every time someone talks about Carmen Maria Machado's writing, it's talked about through like a feminist queer lens, and I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. So Her Body and Other Parties did not land for me. This is like a short story collection that's got horror elements mixed with like feminist themes and other things as well. But what really like set me off was I didn't realize that half of the book was one story, and it was all SVU recap. Why? It was like over 50 pages of just SVU recap. And I'm like, what is the point of this? There was like no profound thinking at the end. There was nothing that tied it to the other stories. It was just like a fangirl dump about these two characters. And I could not for the life of me, and maybe I'm just dumb, but I didn't understand why that was in there. I thought that there were two stories that I really, really liked. The first story called The Husband Stitch, I enjoyed that one. And I also liked the story called 8 Bites, which was about like, you know, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, like the projection of how we view our self-image onto others. Like that story was really interesting, but everything else felt too experimental, not memorable. And the SVU recap drove me nuts, especially because I didn't care about the show to begin with. I ended up skipping like over half of the recap. It was honestly ridiculous. Like, how do you get that published? And this book was like a finalist for something. A finalist while having that much of a show recap in there? It was wild to me. Oh, number 2 makes me so upset. It makes me so upset because I've been wanting to read this book for so many years, and then I finally did, and then after I read it, I feel like I was in a slump for fantasy for so long. So the book I'm going to talk about is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This book actually made me rage. So I listened to this on audio at the beginning of the year too. Ironically, some of these books are like beginning of the year reads, and I just could not help but think that the main character was the dumbest girl. She made me so mad, and there was like an unnecessary love triangle. Like the world was so interesting. It's like based on like Chinese mythology. Our main character is literally the daughter of a moon goddess, and like the moon goddess is like described as being super ethereal. It's a very cool like celestic feeling fantasy, which sounded right up my alley. And there's like so much lore that goes into the world, but we spent way too much time on this stupid love triangle that like had no satisfying resolution at the end of this first book. It was just conflict for the sake of conflict, and I'm like, there is so much other conflict going on in the story. Why are we focusing on these characters? And it felt like the two male characters that were part of this love triangle didn't have any other defining character traits other than being drawn to our main character. That's what like their whole characters were framed around, it felt like. So unfortunately, this book was a big flop for me, and I won't be reading the second one, which I'm bummed about because like covers are beautiful, world idea would have been cool, and I'm so glad I didn't buy this book because I almost bought it in order to read it because I'm like, I'm gonna love this book. I did not. Number 1 book that I did not like this year was a novel love story by Ashley Poston. I read 2 Ashley Poston books this year. I read The Dead Romantics and I read this one. Dead Romantics almost made this list, but it didn't quite because there was some merit to it where I was like, oh, okay, like the depictions of grief and family were more interesting than the romance. But this book, there was no romance, there was no overarching plot, it was meandering, and I just could not get invested. I didn't see the chemistry between the 2 leads. Oh, I should probably tell you about the story before I start ranting. So we have our main character, and I don't even remember her name because that's how much I did not care about this book. It felt like it was something with an E. Maybe it was like Elsie or something. I don't know, something with an E. It was her and the main love interest, which was Anders. And so, like, the premise is interesting where our main character goes to this cabin every year with, like, her smutty romance book club friends, and they just hang out there and, like, read books and chat and have a good time. But this year, nobody seems to be able to make it because of like life events and everything. And so our main character is very distraught by this because she's been having a rough year and she really needed this to boost her morale. So she's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna go by myself because why not? And so she's traveling over there in her car, and then she gets lost in like a storm, winds up in the town of her favorite romance series, and the author that wrote this series had just passed away. She's stuck in this town and nobody else in the town seems to know that she's like an actual human. They're all like the characters from the story. But then she meets Anders, who's the love interest, and he's like, yeah, I'm not supposed to be here either. And so the two hit it off after that. Hit it off is like being generous. He's supposed to be like super grumpy, and then she is like a quirked up millennial coded character, and which is fine, but like don't overdo it. Like that was my complaint about Dead Romantics, was the main character would like unironically say like zoom zoom juice as coffee, and this main character and the main character from Dead Romantics could swap and they would not be different at all. So it just felt like there was not a lot of characterization other than, oh, he's grumpy and she's quirky. And how many times have we seen that before? A million. There's nothing unique about the story. The only thing that I can remember like vividly from this book is the amount of times that the main character was compared to like black tea and he had minty green eyes. Like that was used over and over and over again. And like I'm all for like a reoccurring thing in literature, but when that is the only description that you use for the main character, and I don't know anything about his personality and I just know about his minty green eyes and his scent of black tea, maybe that's not the best, you know? This book just felt so flat, especially because it was like it was an S tier concept, but like an F tier execution, which makes me really, really upset and really not hopeful for future Ashley Puston books. But it's so hard because I love magical realism so much, so I want to like her stories. But I feel like the first two that I've read were not hits for me. Maybe that'll change if I read like The 7-Year Slip, or she's got a new book coming out next year. I'm not like writing her off entirely. I'm not writing any of these authors off entirely, but other than Tessa Bailey. I will say that. But I was really disappointed by this. I know I'm not the only one who's disappointed by this book too, but I did not like it at all. Anyways, pretty short video here, but those were my top 5 least favorite books from 2024. Overall, I had a really good reading year, so I don't have too much negativity, and hopefully I wasn't too harsh on any of these books. And if you love these books, I'm so happy for you. Like, that's great because literature is subjective and it's all something we can enjoy in different ways and have different interpretations of. But if you also didn't like these books, you're in solidarity with me. But thank you for spending some time with me. I hope you have a happy holiday season and your 2025 goes off without a hitch. Have a great start of the year, and hopefully I'll see you next time with more videos. Make sure to subscribe, and my Instagram handle is the same on here, which is Pages and Pastimes. But I'll see you next time. Bye!